So hopefully you're in the right place where you want it to be. My name is Sarah Horsley, and I'm with Rising Sun Consulting in the Boston area. And this workshop is co-sponsored, of course, NACEDA, and also by the Massachusetts Association of CDCs. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about what we have planned for today. After our welcome, we're going to do some introductions of everyone in the chat using the chat function. And then we'll talk a little bit about the importance of taking time for ourselves as organizers. And then we'll get into the core competency tools, this suite of 3 tools that I had the honor of helping to develop for organizers and community engagement staff. We'll talk about a couple of examples, some case studies of organizations and organizers that have been using the tools already. And then we'll conclude with a question and answer period about 3:45. And if you can try to save your questions until then, that will help us get through all that we have to get through in this short time together. If you like, you can write down your questions or comments, or you can feel free to put them in the chat. And Pam and Leah are going to help me keep track of that. And then, of course, we'll end promptly at 4 o'clock. So moving right along.
Sarah,
I missed a slide. Here we go. I knew there was a slide missing there. Backtracking. Sorry, Pam, what were you going to say? Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, backtracking. So I just wanted to also share a couple of housekeeping points. We are recording the session. So if you like, you can rename yourself using just your first name. If you need to turn off your camera, we understand. I encourage everyone, the number one rule of Zoom, of course, is to try to keep your microphone muted when you're not talking, so we can minimize any background noise. And I also recommend maybe once we get a little farther into the slides, when we're talking about the tools in particular, you may want to put your Zoom on speaker view so that you can see everything that we're sharing on the screen. All right, so we went over our agenda. Now we're going to work our way through by starting with some introductions, and this keeps skipping ahead. All right. Sorry about the slides there. All right, we're now on the correct slide. So what I want to do is do some introductions in the chat, talking about who our organizing hero and heroines are. So first I want to thank and give credit to Boston area organizer Vicente Sanabria, who shared this idea with me of honoring our organizing heroes. So for those of you who are newer to Zoom, if you hover over the bottom of your screen, you should be able to see a box that says chat. So if you click there, what I'd like folks to do is put into the chat your name, your pronouns, and the name of one hero or heroine of organizing. It might be an individual, a group, or a whole social movement that has inspired you. And then 2 or 3 qualities of that hero. Something about that hero that makes them a hero of organizing to you. So I'm going to stop sharing the slides for just a minute so it's easier for us to see. So again, your name and pronouns, the name of a hero, and 2 or 3 qualities of that hero. Are people able to access the chat function? People may be still thinking, who is that hero or heroine of yours? Again, it might be an individual, it might be a community group, it might be a whole social movement. and what are a couple of qualities of that hero that makes them a hero of organizing to you. So as you notice heroes and heroines that are being shared in the chat, see if there's some that you recognize. Maybe there's some new organizations or individuals to you. Notice if you see any themes emerging around the qualities that these heroes and heroines share. And you can keep that chat open and keep an eye on it. I think some folks are still sharing. See a lot of women being named, which is nice to see. Great. So if you haven't yet shared, you can still go ahead and do that. We're going to keep moving on in the interest of time. So now I just want to say a few words about the importance of taking time for ourselves as organizers. As community organizers, we're always thinking about all the change that we want to help bring about, whether it be a local level, national level. It can feel hard to take time, right, for our own growth. But we really must make that time and space to reflect on our strengths, where we have learning edges, and take the time and find the ways to deepen our abilities so that we can be more effective organizers. So the Melking Institute for Community Building, which is a program of Mass Association of CDCs, and NeighborWorks America, which is a national organization similar to NACEDA, share this goal of making sure that organizers have that time and space to develop. And so they asked me to develop a suite of tools that organizers and community engagement staff can use to assess and advance their development. So being an organizer, I tend to do things collectively. And so I can tell you honestly that the tools we're presenting here today were created by and for organizers from Eastern Massachusetts. Of course, there are 4 organizers around the country, but we being located in the Boston area, we were able to work with organizers from community development corporations and other groups to identify 6 core competency areas, so core skill and knowledge areas of organizing. And we did this through a survey and also a couple of pretty in-depth focus groups. And then the organizers helped pilot the tools. They gave feedback on content and format, and a set of organizers did a whole cohort for 9 months where they used the tools in conjunction with their everyday work to see how those tools could help them develop professionally and improve their work. So, did we skip a slide here? No. So I meant to say in terms of what you've been sharing in the chat that we're going to kind of refer back to that in a little bit. So bear with me as we get there. So now we're going to briefly review each of the 3 tools, and we will be sharing on the screen the tools one by one. But I also wanted to make sure that people saw that when you logged into today's session, you can also access 2 of the tools there. There's a folder that has links to the tools. And if you need assistance with that particular tech issue, you can email Nadine S., which is Nadine Sanchez from MACDC. And again, just a reminder, since we don't have a huge amount of time in the workshop, if you can either put your questions or comments in the chat or note them down for yourself and you can ask them later, we will have a good question and answer session at 3:45 or possibly sooner if we finish sooner. So in a minute, I'm going to ask Leah to share the first tool, but first I just want to let you know kind of the overall purpose of the tool, which is that it's an at-a-glance chart, just a one-page chart that shows these 6 key skill and knowledge areas that are vital for strong organizers and community engagement staff. So I'm going to stop sharing at this point and ask Leah to share the core competencies chart. All right. So as you take a look at this chart, take a few moments. I know some of it is a little small, but hopefully you can at least read the headings of those 6 boxes. You have 6 different squares, which are color coded, as you will see across the other tools. And each of the boxes corresponds to one of the 6 core competency areas that the organizers identified. Now, thinking back to those qualities you identified from your hero or heroine, maybe see if you notice some of those qualities showing up in some of those headings of those core competency boxes or areas. As you take a look there, those headings, building relationships, commitment to social change, fostering community leadership, conducting campaigns, program and team management, and staff supervision. Are there any that resonate with you and your experience of organizing? Any surprises? Of course, this blue box, the staff supervision, is generally more, going to be a subset of organizers and community engagement staff, those who are in the more director of organizing position or maybe middle level positions. Although a lot of organizers do supervise volunteers. So again, you can note down any questions or comments, reactions. You can put them in the chat if you like. And now we're going to move on to the second tool, which builds on these 6 areas, these 6 core competency areas. So again, the chart is a chance for the organizer, for whoever, the supervisor, to take a look at a glance. What are those 6 buckets of core competency areas for organizing and community engagement? And then the second tool is the tracker or tracking tool. There it is. Hopefully you can see it well enough. You don't need to read the fine print. I'm going to kind of go over it. So the purpose of the tracking tool is to enable an organizer, community engagement staff to evaluate their own skill and knowledge levels in those 6 core competency areas and to identify next steps so they can deepen their learning and their ability. So the goals of the tracking tool, we outline at the beginning of the tool, show the path. So in other words, help organizers and supervisors see the path from beginning to intermediate to advanced, which we call foundational to emerging to proficient. Those were words that organizers felt were more appropriate and reflected the journey better for them. The tool also, we really wanted to be, this tracking tool in particular to be adaptable. So that's why we leave it in the Microsoft Word format so that individual groups, organizers can make changes to the chart, make it work for them as an individual, for them as an organization. And then finally, and almost most importantly, we want to make sure that everybody knows this is an empowerment tool. This is not an evaluation tool. It's rather for the organizer, staff member to assess their own strengths and gaps, and then make a plan, ideally with their supervisor, but even on their own, to figure out ways they can further develop. And as I've sort of said a couple times, or indirectly said, the tool can be used as an or by an organizer or community engagement staff person on their own, or with a supervisor, or even a whole organizing department or program could work through the tool together. So now, Leah, if you can go to page, let's go to page 5, just for a different color. So you start to see pages 3 and on. These are the actual meat of the tracking tool. This is where a staff person, an organizer, is going to identify their level, whether it be foundational, emerging, or proficient in each of those, not only each of those buckets of core competency areas, but actually specific skills or knowledge within those core competency areas. So the headings of each of these pages 3 through 14 correspond to those 6 areas of competency that are color-coded on the chart. And that was also feedback from an organizer. Let's color-code it so people can easily, work from the chart to the tracker to the third tool, which we'll get to in a minute. So an organizer takes a look and on the very left column and says, okay, the skill of cultural competence and awareness and ability to navigate power dynamics. And then they look across the second, third, and fourth columns and take a look and see, well, where do I feel like my skill development is at? Am I the sort of beginner or foundational? Am I intermediate, which we call emerging, or am I advanced, which we call proficient? And Leah, if you can go, well, on this page, let me just say before you move on to the next page, you see there's a lot of text, right? So each of those boxes has some description of what does a foundational level look like for this particular skill. So we give some possible description of what it could look like. But if you look at the next page, Leah, just one more page, you see, oh, there's a lot of blank space. So for some people, this is much better. They like to work with a tool that doesn't have so much wordiness in it. And they know, okay, I'm looking at cultural competence, awareness of, and ability to navigate power dynamics. I know what that looks like at a beginner, intermediate, or advanced level. I don't need all that description. So again, this was feedback from organizers who were using the tools, piloting it, saying, well, some people want that description and some people don't. So let's include both. So then, Leah, if you can go to the last page, page 15. So this last page is an opportunity, and again, it's a template, that an organizer or a supervisor or a team could modify for their own use, but it gives just that template so that the organizer can identify, okay, after I've done this whole assessment on all these different 5 or 6 core competency areas, what are my top 3 goals for the coming year? What skill area, knowledge area, specific skill or knowledge or experience do I want to gain? And list those down. And then underneath, detail out what are the specific ways that I'm going to try to achieve those goals. Is it going to be attending a training? Is it going to be working more closely with my supervisor and reflecting more regularly on that particular skill? Is it going to be doing some kind of peer learning or other kind of coaching or some other resource for learning? And at the very bottom, again, an organizer said, put in there specific space for the supervisor to identify how can I support the organizer in this plan of action. So that's the very bottom. as supervisor, I can support the staff to attain the goals by. So that sort of holding the supervisor accountable as well as, although again, it's not an evaluation tool, but it's sort of an agreement between the supervisor and the organizer there. Great. So thank you, Leah. Now we should go to the last tool, which is called the Training and Resource Catalog. So this one we did not include in the resources that you can download because, as you can imagine, it's very hard to keep it up to date because trainings are changing all the time. And then of course, COVID hit and everything changed. So the goal with this catalog is that it's going to be up on the Mel King Institute website, which again is a program of Mass Association of CDCs in Massachusetts. But this includes workshops, trainings, courses, conferences, online tools, and other resources from around the country that can help organizers achieve their professional development goals. And there's different tabs. Some are trainings specifically at Mel King Institute, some are trainings elsewhere, again, around the country. And the tab that we're looking at, which again, I'm sorry, it's a little small, but this is the one that's going to change the least often because it's other resources. So it's like web tools, resources that various organizations and groups have put together and permanently put on a website for people to access. And this again will be eventually available on Mel King Institute website. So one last thing I'm going to say, and then we'll move on to some case studies about how organizers have been using these tools. Just something that organizers said again and again, also consultants that coach organizers kept bringing up as we were going through the process of designing these tools and doing the focus groups, is that professional development in any field, but maybe especially in organizing, is not just about trainings, and just doing trainings is not going to be enough. And so some of the ways, and I'll share this slide in a minute, that we found that have been helpful are peer learning, for one thing, and Mass Association of CDCs has an organizers peer group that meets every couple of months. NeighborWorks has cohorts and various opportunities for groups to learn from each other. And, organizers often find it helpful just to do site visits to other organizations. And then also, of course, coaching, mentoring, whether it be the supervisor, direct supervisor, or somebody outside an organization, but also just remembering as we do organizing and as a staff person to constantly do the work with an action and reflection cycle so that you're doing the work, but reflecting on how did it go, how can it be improved, how can I build on my skills. So one last thing I forgot to say about the training catalog, training and resource catalog. Again, it's color coded, so it's hopefully easier for people to find, oh, I'm looking for a training on conducting campaigns and initiatives. So let me take a look at the purple section. All right, Leah, thanks. You can stop sharing. And I'm going to share again in just a moment. Shoot. So at this point, we are going to briefly talk about how but organizers in the Eastern Massachusetts area have been using the tools. There we go. And then in just a couple minutes, we'll have time for question and answer and discussion. So as I mentioned, there's a group of, I would say, 6 or 7 organizations in Eastern Massachusetts that did a cohort over about 9 months where we did a lot of peer learning and sharing, and also the organizers and their supervisors use the tools in their day-to-day, alongside their day-to-day work. So a couple of examples of groups from that cohort neighborhood developers in Chelsea, Massachusetts, around a little bit before the time that this cohort started. That organization was trying to redesign their community engagement work to more deeply incorporate community organizing. And so at the beginning of that redesign, their community building team used both the chart, that one-page chart, as well as the tracking tool with all their community building staff, and found that actually they had a wide breadth of experience and a wide breadth of even understanding of what is organizing, what is the definition. And so the director of community building at the neighborhood developers found that through using these tools, they found, hey, we should do a training on organizing and do it all together so that we can come up with, a common understanding and a baseline to move forward. And so that was helpful. And then they have again used the tools, another, I think 6 months or so later, in conjunction with their work planning for the next year. And another organization has been using the tools in a different way, which is Dorchester Bay Economic Development Corporation in Dorchester and Boston. And they have a youth force program where they work with young people, offering them actual employment during the year and during the summer, but they also do a lot of leadership development and learn about community organizing. And so the youth force manager, Michelle Weiner, found that the chart and the tracking tool enhanced the clarity of the young people's learning around what their own wanted, the competency areas they were supposed to master and their objectives, and also just made community organizing much more real to them. So thank you for bearing with me, reviewing all the tools. We're going to move into the Q&A now. And I think overall, we're going to try to alternate between the questions from the chat and people raising your hand now. But I just want to check with Pam first if there was anything that I missed, since I wasn't able to really follow the chat, that you think we should start with, or if we need to kind of address first.
Hi, no, Sarah, I think the only thing, someone did ask about accessing the materials, and Nadine generously told people. So if you're curious about how you can access these materials, you can look at the chat. Nadine gives instructions there. Okay,
great. So yeah, look at the chat if you're trying to figure out how to access the materials. And I'm not positive, but if we have people's email addresses, we can also email out the slides as well as the materials later. And the slides will also be eventually put into that folder. What happened to my video? That's weird. Okay, sorry. So questions, so there weren't any other questions to start with, Pam, from the chat that we missed? Oh, now you're muted, Pam.
Not yet.
Okay. So do people have reactions, questions? We can also share one of the tools again, screen share, if you'd like to look at it again. Do you think these tools will be useful to you as an organizer or people that do organizing at your group, your organization?
This is Pam. I have a question to the group.
Yeah, please.
I'm wondering how many of you have gone to a training to help you with your community organizing?
Great question.
You can, is there that you can raise your hand? I think, can people raise their hands or?
Yeah, you should under reactions, or you can do a thumbs up under the reactions. So it looks like Lily has done a training. And let's see, I was curious to see where people were from. Of course, we didn't ask people to put that. We have some folks from Chicago and Illinois. Somebody from Michigan. I know a couple of people are here from Massachusetts. Oh, Midwest Academy, yeah. Willie said he's gone to Midwest Academy. They have really good trainings.
One of our favorites.
What's that?
One of our favorites.
Yes. Yep, absolutely. And they have kept going, moved online during the pandemic, so they're still available. All right, somebody from Newview, welcome.
Hey.
Newview participated in our cohort that went over the tools, and I didn't share that, but it sounds like they may, that was another sort of outgrowth of the tools. Was some people thought, well, maybe we could adapt these and use with community leaders as well to help community leaders develop their own, skills and knowledge.
There's a really good question there, Sarah. Do you see that from Kristen?
The definition of community organizing?
Yeah. Oh, no, that's from Suzanne. Sorry. Yeah. Do you want to tackle that, Sarah?
Yeah. Well, I will, and I'm curious if other people have others. Yeah, I do community organizing trainings for community health workers in Boston and in Lowell, Massachusetts. And these are folks who do, outreach with all sorts of different populations, different health issues. So they don't do community organizing themselves, but it's helpful for them to know what it is. And I also try to teach my students. I teach at UMass Boston, so I try to teach them a little bit about it, because sadly in this country, we don't really get exposed to community organizing. I don't think much, certainly not, in my education, I wouldn't say. I mean, the way I define it is mobilizing or helping bring people together to identify issues that they're concerned about, to build their collective power, to advocate for what they need and want. I mean, that's one definition. There's various variety of things. Maybe Leah, if you can put up the chart again. Yeah, Pam says, put your own definition of community organizing in the chat. I think, some people sometimes can get it confused with advocacy. Advocacy is not necessarily people fighting on their own behalf. It might be somebody advocating on someone else's behalf. And the other core piece is you're building that collective power. But yeah, so some of the core components include that relationship building. You've got to build those relationships between members of a community or members of a workplace, and community leadership. It's not about me as the organizer going to the State House and saying, this community wants this and you better do it. It's the community members themselves, me as an organizer, helping people maybe learn the jargon about a policy or an issue, and connect with each other and identify what's the most important issue or issues to us. And then maybe build their confidence, help them build their skills. Then they go to the State House or wherever it is, the City Hall, their boss, whatever the decision maker, the power holder is. Yep, Sarah Burns has a great succinct definition. Organizing is people coming together to create collective power to accomplish mutual self-interest and goals. Yeah, so Suzanne, yeah, it is like a facilitator. It's a balance because there's different approaches to organizing. Some of the traditional approaches say I should never insert my own point of view or analysis. But some other approaches say, well, it's helpful to have, a systemic analysis of systemic oppressions so that people aren't operating with less information, only the information they're getting from the mainstream. A mechanism used to enhance a need in the community where traditional political or corporate efforts are missing. Yes, every community may need different things. Yeah, so it has to be flexible. Gosh, people just want to hear me talk. Let's see. I'm curious, did people if people want to share, again, in the chat is okay, but you can welcome to unmute yourself and share. Did you feel that there was a connection between those qualities of your hero or your heroine and, you know, what we're seeing on the screen in terms of some of those core competency areas? All right, let's see. People don't want to talk. How, I was just thinking of what I was going to say. How many of you actually do organizing at your organization? Breakouts, weekly breakouts. We didn't anticipate this problem. We thought we were going to go on too long and not have enough time for Q&A. Sharonda suggests breakouts. If people want to talk about, in fact, actually, how many were people able to access the documents fairly well? It's only a couple people that have problems, because if you have the documents in front of you, you can even play around with them in the breakout rooms. Well, even if you can't, I think what we could do is a couple of people's thumbs up. They're able to access the documents. Even if you don't have them in front of you, from what you took in by, you know, seeing them on the screen, why don't we break into breakouts, and we'll have a couple of questions that I'll put in the chat. In terms of thinking about how you might use these tools from your own unique role. So if you're an organizer, if you're a supervisor, if you're someone who doesn't do organizing but is somehow supporting organizing in your organization. And Pam, you think of any other good question, or I can just keep thinking?
Leah, can you set up breakout rooms? What were the questions again? I'm sorry.
So far, how each person, you know, have a discussion in your breakout room, how you might use the tools from your own unique role, whether you be an organizer, supervisor, someone who doesn't do organizing but wants to see it flourish at your organization.
Yeah.
And I mean, maybe anything else that could support. Are there other than tools like this, are there other, I'm struggling for what the word is, things, other pieces that could support professional development for organizers?
Sure.
Whether it be, I need more time, I need more funding for professional development, or I need my organization to prioritize organizing, or I don't know, could be anything else.
Yeah, like what barriers do you or your organization have to doing
Yep. Okay, so we have 3 good questions. If you don't like those questions, talk about something else, about the tools. And I think Leah is going to put some breakout rooms. So we'll take, let's do 7 minutes, and we can then check in how people are doing. So anybody who just entered, we just entered breakout rooms to talk about using the tools that I had presented. I don't know if you were able to access the tools from where you signed into the session. Let's see if I can find instructions. Here we go. Okay, for anyone who's still looking for how to find the tools, I'm putting that in the chat. And I believe that Leah invited everyone to join a breakout room. So you should see on your screen an option to join a breakout room. And we'll be coming back together in about 6 minutes.
I think it's possible. Hold on.
Come on, don't make me play the teacher and call on someone.
Sarah, hi, this is Danny LeBlanc.
Hi, Danny.
I'll offer up a little bit because I ended up in a group with 2 women who have terrific skills, but are brand new to organizing. I think one at Harbor Light Communities in Beverly and one in Michigan. And so I think I was just trying to play the role of saying that I thought because they're brand new, their reactions to these materials and what they can use as organizers is really valuable, and that you and MACDC would want to hear that going forward, because it is your intention for these tools to be used and to develop related training, programs through the Mel King Institute and so forth. So, and then somebody sent us back to the main room, so we stopped talking.
Thank you, Danny. That's really helpful and very, very true. We want these tools to be used, not to sit on a shelf, and they need to be helpful for everybody at all different levels and from all different, parts of the country and so forth. So
yeah, and it was Gretchen and Suzanne and Nadine that I was with. So if any of them have anything else to add, I just thought I'd jump into the silence.
Thank you, Danny.
So I think Catherine and I both are at organizations where we're not really in organizer roles. And so I think the interest in having programs and work that you're doing be informed by community interests and voices and leaders and strategizing, I think is, it's just so critical, even when what we're doing is policy advocacy, but it's hard when you feel disconnected, I think, and it's hard to figure out exactly how to move in that direction. But this is still really interesting to look at. And I think from my perspective at Housing Action Illinois, we've been part of more of a grassroots organizing movement recently in passing legislation at the Cook County level, which is where Chicago is, that was fair housing protections for people with arrest and conviction records. And the coalition that was built was really powerful. There were all of these really key leaders with lived experience who testified at hearings, shared what their priorities were and what they didn't want to negotiate away. And now, after passing it, there was kind of this fizzle already, and then the pandemic hit, and now, who takes leadership of continuing this? How do we figure out our goals or priorities or move forward? I hate to see the energy lost. My role is like development and communications, and I'm just interested in it. I'm not actually technically necessarily given hours to work on it. Right. But I think, that Pam had a really great point that, we've had issues with getting our leaders connected on Zoom calls, and that maybe it is just back to phone calls, having everyone do one-on-one phone calls and making sure, maybe we just try and stay connected right now, and that maybe it doesn't take on a new priority. We don't, tackle a whole new campaign right now. Maybe we just kind of weather this and stay in touch so that when we are down the line able to, maybe we can continue to work together. I don't know.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kristen. Yeah, because remember back to those core competencies, right? Relationship building is at the foundation, and it has to be true, long-term, genuine relationship building. Is not just for that campaign, right? You really care as an organization, as an organizer, and then the leaders care about each other. And so, yeah, maybe right now it's the relationships. It's even some sort of non-organizing things like just making sure people have the basics, right? Are they connected to food, to health care, whatever they need, and then something will eventually grow out of that. And you can still, maybe in a less intensive way, but also that leadership development could still, that component might still be there in some way. Maybe it's helping people learn the technology or, things like that. I mean, certainly we had one member group of the cohort who that was part of their focus after the pandemic hit, was like, okay, they're down on Cape Cod. For people who know Massachusetts, it's a lot of smaller towns. So just trying to get folks, to stay connected and learn how to use various platforms. And so putting out flyers, helping people understand all the different options and which works for what and how to use it. So thank you, Kristen. Any other folks want to share about their conversations?
I would just add that we actually did what you were talking about, Kristen, and I work with public housing residents. So when COVID hit, we had maybe like 10 residents call through all the numbers that we had just to do what we called a wellness check. And it was a real skill building moment for the people making the calls. And then of course, it sort of made more connections just among the whole community. So COVID actually really presents an opportunity, to do relationship building, like Sarah was saying. It's not, I mean, it is politicized, but it's also kind of not. So we can take advantage of the ways in which kind of everyone is open to more connections right now.
Yeah, because I can remember when I was more on staff as an organizer, that keeping up the one-on-ones, keeping in touch with people when you're also trying to do campaigns or this or that, it's hard. So yeah, taking advantage of this time. Anyone else talk about barriers or things that make it harder for either you as an organizer, you as a different kind of staff person to take that time to invest in, your own skills and knowledge? All right, last chance. I'm going to share the screen one more time. Make sure I do not go back one. Just to share one other thing that we really came to in this process of working with the organizers, again, from community development corporations, but also from other grassroots groups that work on, tenant rights and other issues in the Boston area, that in addition to these kind of tools, and even financially supporting professional development, one crucial ingredient to help organizers and community engagement staff develop and thrive is that organizations and groups really support community organizing. And so that might look like, making sure it's in the mission, making sure it's in a strategic plan or a planning process, financial support, other kinds of support for organizing, for professional development. For some groups, for a lot of groups, it's making sure the organizing director is on the management team, so they have the sort of equal standing with the other directors, program directors. And also making sure that board members, other staff in the organization, executive director, but also other staff understand what organizing is, and also deepening their skills and knowledge. Because as Kristen, I think, was sharing, right, it may not be your paid role, but if you understand what it is, how it works, you may be able to support that organizing department, that organizing effort from your own role, even if it's from the communications angle, right, or whatever your own role is. So, whoops. Pam, Leah, do you have any parting brilliant comments? I know Pam always has brilliant comments. Logistically, I can say we're, as I said, going to try to share the tools and the slides with everyone. And I was just checking with Leah. We're going to see if we can get the list of organizing heroes and heroines from the chat, because I think that can be something that can be inspiring. And as Danny was saying, if you actually, use the tools or, interact with them and have feedback, we would love to hear how it goes and how you're using them. You can contact the Mel King Institute at this email. You can contact me and keep an eye on the MACDC website. Once the tools are, fully all set, we'll be posting them all there, including that catalog, which will be updated regularly.
Yes, Sarah, I just wanted to make 2 plugs. One, go to the Mel King Institute and sign up for their newsletter. Now that all of our trainings are via Zoom, everyone can access them. And yay,
Exactly.
Nadine just put the Necedah Forum has a bookstore, and Nadine put the link to the bookstore in the chat. And there's some nice books about community organizing at the bookstore. So you should check that out. And Leah just put in the Mel King Institute website in the chat.
So that's, so the trainings are available and accessible beyond Massachusetts, beyond the local level. Thank you, everyone. I hope this was useful. And again, these are, live documents that are evolving. So we really welcome your feedback and we hope you will use them and that they'll be useful. And we are ending one